Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Don't Screw Up Your Kids podcast. I am your host, Kalisha Washington. I am your parenting BFF. I help parents plan with purpose so that we can raise kids who are happy, healthy, and whole. Our guest today is Kyle King. I am so excited to have him on my podcast. He is a school leader, author of 7 books. He is the founder of the Culture Lab, and he's an expert in building contagious culture in schools and organizations. He spent his career empowering students, teachers, and leaders to create environments where everyone can thrive. Kyle, welcome to the podcast and tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to this point.
Look, I appreciate you so much. This is exciting. Amazing introduction, and there's so many things that I could say that got me to this point. But one thing that I always like to help people remember, an audience remember, is that I'm a father. I'm a father of 2 amazing children, a 2-year-old and a 10-year-old. My 2-year-old, I feel like she's going on 15 because she literally runs the house. And my 10-year-old, he just turned 10 this past weekend, and he's definitely my world. And I think my journey began, I believe, when I had children. When I had my first son, we got one day before his birthday, and we got a call as I was on the way to the hospital, as he was getting ready to be delivered. Super excited, and we found out that we lost him.
Oh,
And we found out that we lost him. The umbilical cord got caught around his neck. And at that moment, when I saw him and I saw the power of a Black woman giving birth to a son without essentially any help in the hospital, and then having to bury my first son, at that point, it gave me a different appreciation for life. I had 2 amazing parents growing up. I wasn't the traditional kid that came from like the one parent household, or this prison story, or I was homeless story. No, I had great parents. And I was so excited for that moment to be able to be a father. And when it was stripped from me, it took me having to go through a lot of mental and emotional and personal development, truly before I was even ready to give birth or to welcome in my son Carter, that is here with us today. So outside of just the professional, and what's helped me get to this point, I think loss, I think relationships, mentorship, and I think God has always been able to provide a path for me to be able to have not only the resources, not only the knowledge, but the covering and the protection for me to be the father, the man, and just the individual that I am today. So I think a lot of those losses have taught me a lot. But the biggest thing is that, continue to stay humble and don't take those opportunities for granted.
wow. Now, how old were you when you lost your first child?
That's a great question. I was still in college, actually. So I was interning, I remember, with BMW. This was my junior year in college. So I was 18 years old, excuse me, 18 years old. I was running track at a D1 track athlete. So this was definitely a surprise for me. It was with a young lady that I grew up with, literally grew up with, a childhood best friend of mine. The story of how we got back to that point is it doesn't matter, but I think I wouldn't have had it any other way, with another person. And I think how we were able to continue to get connected and stay close from that moment has taught me a lot about resilience, a lot about forgiveness, but a lot about what God talks about in scripture, that unconditional love as well.
Okay. Now, how long was it before you had another child? Had your second child?
That's a great question. So it was 2 years after that. So at this point, I graduated school, was working with Johnson and Johnson, with Janssen Pharmaceuticals, a company of Johnson and Johnson, and was in love. And like most of us, when we're in love, we're not thinking correctly at a lot of times. So we brought in my son Carter, which was truly the biggest blessing for me. And that was the catalyst to why I even transitioned away from Atlanta, where I was living at the time, to Charlotte, North Carolina. And being able to be there with him, being able to watch him grow into the man that he is today. I still find myself sometimes scrolling in my phone and looking at old pictures, and really just watching his development is truly beautiful. saying his first words, taking him. And I'm the parent still today that I always wanted to be the parent that he had his first with me. So he rode the plane with me first. He went to the NBA and NFL game with me first. And he said his first word with me. So it's like I always wanted to be that person and be able to create those moments so that when he's 30 or when he's 40, he could trace back a lot of those moments in his life and he remembers his father being there. And as a Black man, that's something that's important to me, because we hear the stereotypes in the media talk about how Black men especially are not who they used to be, or how we're not present, how we're not good
Mhm.
husbands, how we're not good fathers. But my story has been different. I've failed in business. I've made some terrible decisions relationally and just personally. But the one area that I believe that I've gotten right in my life consistently, now there's been ebbs and flows, but consistently is who I am as a father. And that's the one area I feel like he smiles at me when he sees me. And the one area that I lean on when I need, um, you know, a smile, or when I need a pick me up as well. So anybody listening, I truly believe that kids are your biggest blessing and your biggest gift for sure.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, you said that you came from a two-parent household, and I feel like that's important to spend some time on because there's so many kids that are raised in a single-parent household, and as you said, especially in the Black community, that definitely wasn't my experience, neither as a child nor did I provide that experience for my children. So I would
Yeah.
love to hear how your childhood was and how you think that shaped the man that you are today.
It's an interesting question, Kalisha, because if you would have asked me this around 6 months ago, I would have probably had a completely different answer. And for the last 6 months, I've been heavily in therapy. And I go to like a men's group of therapy where it's a little bit different. It's a lot of accountability, a lot of responsibility. Like I've tried the one-on-one therapist, but I don't know. Either A, I probably wasn't being as honest as I needed to be. And I feel like B, having a group of men in a community that can also challenge you and can pull your BS has been truly beneficial for me. I had I would say a beautiful childhood, and I'm truly grateful. And I feel like when people preface it, you already know that the real is about to come after. But I do realize in the last 6 months that there's been a lot of elements of my childhood that I wish I could have changed. But one thing that I do realize even more is that my parents did the absolute best that they could based upon the knowledge and information that they had in front of them. Um, However, still with that, one of the things that I do want to push back on, and a kind of like a contrarian belief, is this idea of a two-parent household is better than a single-parent household. This ideology that a two-parent household is better than a blended family or a split household is completely different and is completely wrong, in my opinion. So my son's mom and I have never lived together, have were never married, and are now actively in two different relationships. And I envy my son's life and how emotionally intelligent he is, and how he's able to communicate his thoughts, his feelings, how we're able to nurture what he wants rather than it, even if it's different than our own personal experience. We're able to consider his feelings, consider his thoughts, his voice. He lacks certain things, but he has a clear relationship with God, and he has models in his life that he feels comfortable going to, that he can get guidance and advice, and it's allowing him to really create and craft a life that is designed for him, not us as parents designing a life for our children. And I think that's been the biggest challenge that I look back on. I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I never, like, yeah, I'm gifted at it, and I feel like I've found a way to create opportunities from it, but I never wanted to be an entrepreneur, and frankly, I never wanted to be an athlete. And it's crazy. Anybody that knows me, that grew up with me, would say like, "Yo, like, we thought you were going to go professional," and I've dominated at the high school level, at the college levels, Division 1 scholarship athlete. And the truth of the matter is, if it wasn't for a father pushing that, I believe that I would have been a great engineer. I believe that
Mhm.
I was probably called to be something in technology. It's when I'm around it, when I build it, when I understand it and me learning it, it's like I fall in love all over again. And it takes me back to a moment in my childhood when I was 12 years old. I built my first computer in my parents' kitchen. I remember my father and mother connected me with some white guy. I don't remember his name, and he bought all of the parts, the boards, the like everything. And I remember building that computer, and it was probably one of the most beautiful moments of my life. And at that moment, I felt seen, I felt valued, I felt like my opinion and what I wanted mattered. But I think a lot of mistakes that we make as parents, and I've made the same mistake myself, is that we push our kids to what's comfortable, what's convenient, and what we know, and we believe that that is still creating opportunities for them and exposing them. Like, you can learn how to be confident and how to deal with people not playing sports. You
Mm-hmm.
can learn how to communicate and problem solve and critically think, not doing the traditional things, especially that Black households lead our kids to do. Like my daughter, she's only 2, but I believe when my son was 2 and seeing how where my daughter is at 2, she's light years ahead of where he was. And I think, obviously parents are different, moms are different. And I think my the environment that she is in right now is conducive where, yes, I would love for her to be a track athlete and I would love for her to do different things, but I believe there's so many more opportunities that we can provide and we can expose our children to that aren't just sports. And I think that's the biggest thing. I think that's the biggest pushback. I would have loved my father, and still to this day, that the typical Black man story. He's not tapped in with his emotions, and he won't. We've never had a chance to really sit down and really talk through. Like, Dad, what are you thinking? Dad, what's on your mind? And me really getting an honest and vulnerable answer. I think when you're going through your own healing journey, you recognize how far off of other people are from theirs.
Yeah.
But what it does for me as a man now is I push back and create challenge boundaries with my own parents. Like, look, I'm not going to be talked to like a child, or like, just because you haven't processed your emotions, baby. Like, and I'm going to ask questions like that. Like the other day, we had a crucial conversation, and those are the differences, I think, in generations. And I was having this conversation the other day with my wife, and she was explaining, I was like, I want to embrace who my son is because he's emotional and he's tapped in emotionally. And I'll close with this. I think when I was a kid, 20 years ago, if I would have done certain things that he does, like crying in certain situations where he's being challenged on something, I would have been called soft. I would have had baseballs and basketballs thrown at me, or been told to run up and down the street, or just crazy outlandish things. And what I was telling my wife the other day, I was explaining to her, like, I want to embrace Carter's emotion.
Yep.
I want to embrace who he is as a young man, rather than trying to mold him into be something that is not conducive to who he is. So hopefully that answered your question. I feel like I was super long-winded. But I
I
think
think
that,
we got there.
yeah.
That you feel like, so just to recap, I think you're saying that you feel like being raised in a two-parent household is not better than being raised in different settings, but also that your father, you feel in some ways pushed you in a direction you probably would have been better going a different direction if it wasn't sports,
Oh,
right? You
100%.
would have preferred to go into engineering. This is something that when I was an educator in Northern California, I was at a school that was created by Kevin Johnson, and we had our benefit dinner. He brought in Charles Barkley. And this is one of the things that Charles Barkley talked about. He said that when he visits Black schools, kids are always like, I'm going to be a professional basketball player, baseball player, football player. He said, but when he goes to white schools, they're planning a career outside
Mhm.
of sports.
Yeah,
Sports is a thing that they do, but it's not their lives.
exactly.
And I'm sure that you've seen working in education where a lot of parents, they may not show up for parent conference, but they'll be at the game.
Oh, 100%.
And
100%.
as an educator, my strategy was to go to those games and meet those parents in the bleachers,
Mhm.
because they may not come to parent conference, they may not come to back to school night, but they will be in the bleachers. And when
Yeah,
I see them cheering for my student, I'm introducing myself,
exactly.
But do you see a pathway away from that? Because most kids don't make it into professional sports. There's only so many spots. Most kids don't make it. What is the pathway? How do we reprogram perhaps parents? so that they're not looking at that as their ticket out of the hood. Because I'm also wondering, and maybe you have seen, is it is it a poverty issue? Is it that poor black parents are looking at sports as a ticket out of the hood? Do wealthy black parents do the same thing? I don't think that they do, but I don't know if we have any data for that.
I think it's a loaded question, and I'm aware of multiple hats when I answer this question. I thank God that I have had a career in education. As a teacher, as a dean of students, as an AP, as a director of culture, as a board member, because what that has shown me is not only the gaps that a lot of our families and children are experiencing, but also the opportunities that lie in after school programs, coding programs, chess programs, and all these different things. And it didn't really click for me, to be honest, Kalisha, until I walked in and started teaching a classroom, because I taught in an urban district, an F school. And coming in there, I wanted to be the teacher that exposed these students to anything that was possible. So I brought in entrepreneurial friends of mine. I brought in nurses and doctors. I brought in a chess program and taught my students literally in an ELA classroom chess, how to play chess. I brought in people that had computers and taught these kids how to code, because it was so much bigger and deeper than the lesson that I was teaching. It was no longer about ELA. It was no longer about these curriculum standards. It was about, how do I expose these kids to everything that's possible so that you can have options. So I don't think it's a poverty issue. I think
Mm.
it's an access to information issue. And a lot of times we talk about privilege like it's a race thing, like, white privilege, but black people have privilege too. Like, if you're a teacher, you have certain access in research and resources, probably for your children or in your sphere of influence, that other people just don't have access to. If you are a leader in schools, you probably have access to certain programming and different things. So if I wasn't a director of culture over a school district and had people coming to our school trying to partner in all these different things, it told me what was possible. If I wasn't partnering with an after school director, an after school program when I initially got into education, and I saw that there were STEM programs and I saw that there were other options, then I'm like, oh my God, like, that's possible. If I didn't have, colleagues and even friends from different races, and I saw their kids were literally at 13 years old going out of the country for the whole summer to experience museums in other countries and learning languages, or other friends that were sending their kids to soccer programs for 6 weeks, or $1,200, $1,300 for these programs, but they were saving up the whole year to send their kids to these programs, then I would have been like, wow, I don't know. So I think environment is one. I think access to information is two. And I think a willingness is three. A willingness to understand, what does my child want? And what are the gifts, the talents, the skills that my child possesses? And how, me as a parent, how can I push that child in a way where I'm accelerating those specific things? And I think, again, going back to my initial thought, sports is not the only option. Like, my son, he plays soccer kind of off and on, but he's in coding Thursday, Friday, Saturday, every single week. And yeah, it's almost $300 a month, but we have to ask ourselves, it's not cheap playing sports either. That's a $1,000 bill right there. So you have to prioritize, again, what's most important to your child based upon their levels and based upon their interests. And black parents find the way. People in poverty, people in these areas in the projects, they find the way to make things happen in regards to paying
Mhm.
for jerseys and all these different things. So we have to find a way to be able to go learn some new information as well.
Yeah, but my question was more about, like, I think that people who grew up in poverty see sports as their way out of poverty versus engineering as their way out of poverty. Whereas when you have people who are more affluent or who have the education, they see options for their kids. They see, my child can be a doctor, my child can be a lawyer, my child can be an engineer, versus our take it out of the hood, or even entrepreneurship. But most folks who don't have that experience and, like you said, don't have that access, haven't been in those environments, and previous generations, I think, had less of that than we have now. Then we have so many more examples of wealth, of Black wealth specifically.
I would
You
agree
know,
with that.
we have the Black billionaires that we didn't have when I was growing up in the
Yeah.
70s, you know, and so now, except if it was sports or entertainment, you know, and so I think that oftentimes Black families think this is the way that I'm going to get my kid out of poverty, is going to get us, because when we see those examples of people who do make it, first thing they do is buy their mama a house,
Mm.
right? First thing they do is start buying some cars. They start employing their family and friends, right? So I think some people do see it as their ticket out of whatever their situation is, but I don't know that if their parents were already doctors and lawyers, do they come with that same mindset? Like, we didn't see that in the Cosby Show,
I don't
right?
know.
We didn't.
I
We
think
didn't see Theo saying, "I'm gonna play basketball to get out the hood," right?
I think and this is probably really insensitive, but this is just honestly how I feel. And, hopefully I don't get canceled. I feel like in the days of social media and movies, and like we have so much more access now. I think it's just a bunch of BS. I think if you literally went and scrolled on your phone for maybe 10 minutes, you wouldn't only see basketball players.
True.
Like you see blacks or Indians or Asians and in everything now. So it's a matter of what you want to believe is true. I think it's a belief system. I think
Okay.
it's what you want to believe is true about your possibility. Now, in your local environment, the people out that came out of that environment that are doing well may have been basketball players. However, when we allow ourselves to only think local, then we stay local. So I
Mm-hmm.
think my father, neither one of my parents went to college. And I think I have this perspective because of how I grew up. Neither one of my parents went to college. My dad, one of 13, his father died early in life, and his mom died when he was 6. My mother was pregnant at 13 years old, never had a father growing up. And her mom, was kind of in and out at the time. And I think what I've seen them create, like my mom was the first Black executive for Volvo Cars for 25 years, starting as an assistant. She now has transitioned over and now is a Black executive with Amazon, one of the number one companies in the world, with no college degree ever. So I think this whole story of like, I just don't believe it. I've seen parents and I've been a part of watching them be able to create despite the odds, growing up in Jersey City in the projects with nothing. I remember my mom literally over Thanksgiving, she was telling me a story. They were so broke at one point where they couldn't even purchase toilet paper, and they had to use a washcloth to essentially clean themselves after they go to the bathroom, to being able to now, years later, she was just in Switzerland a few months ago and she's getting ready to plan a trip to Barcelona. Like, and the things that they've been able to experience in Super Bowls and Olympics and all of these different things, because it was a belief that I can be more. So I think the level of access that people have right now, especially in this country and in our world, there's no excuse. And I've been to Ghana, and to Africa, and I studied abroad in Ghana. I think it's an American issue that
Mm.
we just lack drive, we lack vision, we are lazy people. And this is me talking to my people. Like, if you want more, especially in this country, you have the ability to go get it. You just got to work for it and research it. The access is there.
That's interesting, because I sorely disagree. But because I see us working hard, we just don't work hard in ways that build wealth.
That's perspective.
People will go and punch a clock for 40 years, and barely getting by. But we've been programmed to think, I just want to be comfortable.
I do
And
agree with
there's
that.
a business coach that I follow, Myron Golden, who always says, people will ask him, well, how much money you want to make? He has an uncle or somebody. How much money you want to make? He said, as much as I can. He said, sure, you don't mean that. He said, surely I do. He said, we talk about just being comfortable only in terms of money. Because when you say, his uncle will say, I don't want to be greedy. I just need enough money to be comfortable. He said, when I ask you, how smart do you want your kids to be? Oh, just smart enough to be comfortable. We don't say that. How
Nah,
healthy do you want to be? Just healthy enough to be comfortable. We don't say that. But
nah,
when it comes to money, we'll say, I just need enough to be comfortable.
that don't even
And
make sense.
people have gotten to a place of comfortability. And there's a book called Top 10 Distinctions Between Millionaires and Middle Class. And they talk about the middle class are looking for comfort, and that's all they'll get. The millionaires are looking for freedom. And because they're going for freedom, they'll get both freedom and comfort.
100%.
And so I think that we are very hardworking. And especially when I see people who do aspire to be professional athletes, they work really hard.
Oh yeah.
I have a friend who will be on a podcast episode in the future, and his kids get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to train for basketball.
Mm,
He's also a stay-at-home dad, military veteran, has an MBA from USC. So he's hardcore, but now he's a stay-at-home dad training his kids, right?
exactly.
His wife is a doctor. But again, I think that's also access. People don't even know that that's a possibility. Like, who has the option for most people, especially in today's economy, don't have the option for
Yeah,
one parent to stay home, and especially not the dad.
exactly. Exactly.
So, but I do want to go back to what you were saying about your son and his and being emotional. And this is important to me
Yeah.
because oftentimes we tell kids, especially boys, that they can't cry. But
Hmm.
the only emotion that has been acceptable is anger.
Mm.
And that's what lands them in trouble, in jail, things like that, or losing their jobs because
Yeah,
they're allowed to be angry. They're just not allowed to cry,
exactly.
but not considering that anger is an emotion. How
Hmm.
did you get from having the traditional dad who, you know, absent of emotion to a point of it's okay for my son to cry?
It's interesting that you asked that. I think better adults create better parents, and those produce better households. I think over the years, I've always been hard on Carter, especially. But I never really understood initially where that um, where that came from, where that lack of patience came from, where that lack of grace came from, where that lack of understanding and empathy came from. Until I went to therapy years ago, until I really got into my word, until I started studying scripture, until I started serving in the children's ministry at my church, um, until I started working with other children. And I think over time, I started to become better, and I started to really become more in tune with my own emotions. And I remember my therapist at one time, she showed us this like this feelings wheel. And all I knew was like angry, mad, sad, frustrated, aggravated, ambivalent, right? And I think over time, and someone else exposing the multitude of feelings, like, hey, I want you to go on this wheel. And I remember every time we would go there, she'd pull out the wheel, like, what do you feel? I was like, I don't know, where the wheel at? And it's just like, ooh, I feel this. I was like, I don't know how to put this. And then she would ask, like, why? And then I started implementing that with my son, like, all right, let me show you this wheel. All right, what is it on this wheel that you feel? Well, I don't understand these words. All right, let's pull out the dictionary and understand. Let's learn the emotions. And I think the
Mm,
first step was exposing him, like, look, there's more emotions. You just don't know how to communicate. And even today, it's so cool because he'll be feeling something. I'll be like, all right, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? Dad, I don't have the language. Can you pull out the wheel? It's like, oh, like I love this. Like I love this. And then I'm able to pull out the wheel and it's like, okay, well, what's triggering this emotion? Okay. Well, what do you want? Okay. Well, what will that require? And then attaching activity to that outcome. Okay. Well, why do you feel like that happened? So now it's a completely different dynamic versus like I'm punishing you for expressing your emotion. I feel like that's not fair to our children. And
true.
what I started to see is that I don't want to be the parent that my son is like fearful of me. Now, there's a respect for sure, there's an honor for sure, there's levels to this for sure. But I don't want to ever look at him or him not feel comfortable or not feel like I'm safe. So, for me, it's important to be able to ask better questions and actually be willing to listen to the answer. But again, for me, what happened is I went to therapy and I was exposed to it. And then that allowed me to be better in exposing him to it as well.
So good. I think that we sometimes lack the development or, the self-development that we need as parents. Once we get out of school, we're not reading any books.
Yeah.
I hear too many times adults like, I'm not reading any books. And of course, there's always been the stigma in the Black community of getting therapy. I'm glad that we're moving away from that
Hmm.
stigma where it's becoming socially acceptable for people to say it. And I think that the more people say, hey, I'm getting this therapy and this is how it's helping me, it makes it open other people open to doing the exact
Exactly.
same thing. I
Exactly.
absolutely love that. And like you said, that community that you have of other men who are all seeking to be better.
Yeah.
Having that, I think that that's a big part of why I started the Don't Screw Up Your Kids podcast because I'm like, there's so many of us that have made mistakes
Hmm.
as parents. I know that I've made a fair share,
Oh, 100%.
um, and and I'm on a mission to be better and share how that has been a challenge for me, the things that I've done wrong, so that people can learn from my mistakes instead of having to make those same mistakes themselves.
One of the
Um,
things that you said to me, and we were kind of talking through like your framework, and you didn't say this verbatim, but you said something like, I have to identify what better looks like or what success looks like as a parent.
mhm.
And I think that's so important for me. That's what I had to do. I didn't want to be the parent that my kids can't come to me and talk to me. I didn't want to be the father that he's like literally scared to the point where he's like lying. You know, one thing that I said is very controversial, but it is what it is. It's the podcast. Um, your kids are a mirror of you. If they be lying, I'm sure you be lying. If they're disrespectful and rude to people, I'm sure there's some elements that they found that in you. If they're real, meek or whatever, like whatever, they're good parts and they're bad parts. And I started to see and identify traits in him that I'm like, I don't know about this one. And then I had to look at myself and ask, like, nah, Kyle, you do be doing that though. And
Yeah,
when I improved in that area and then started to have different conversations and then continue to be consistent, it allowed him to be able to change as well. And I think anybody listening, man, it's about you. Like you have to be the first person in your household to change, not your spouse, not your children, not your grandparents, not your parents, none of those other people. You control your change, and then that change will ripple and be able to create change in your household.
I agree. That's one of the things that they talk about in the five love languages.
Hmm.
And there's the five love languages of children and teens, but I remember in the one that was for husbands and wives, said if one of you changes, it'll cause the other to change.
100%.
Yeah. And it's funny when you mention that the kids are a reflection of you, and I believe that. I remember my kids, I can't remember which one of them, but they were being real stubborn. And I was like, oh, you got that from your dad. And
Hmm.
then I thought about it, I was like, wait, they got it from me too.
Oh yeah.
They got a double dose of stubborn, and they really got it from both of us.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things, and I really want to kind of end on this issue that I think is a big
Mhm.
one, is having your son having two households, right?
Mhm.
Because he spends time with his mom and time with you. And so I never thought it was an issue. My daughter wrote about this in her college application letters,
Mm.
that this was the big challenge she had gone through in life. And I dismissed it immediately. I was like, if that's the worst thing you had to do
And
was
you
having
alright.
two households, like my mom was on crack. Okay.
Mm.
You complaining about I had to go between my mom's house and
Yeah,
my dad's house, and we had two sets of rules. So it didn't seem like a big deal to me, but it was a big deal to her.
that's good.
And now I'm seeing it with my grandson. My first grandson is part-time with his dad and part-time with my daughter.
Yeah.
And after every football game, he's telling my daughter, I want to go home with you. And she does. He goes home with her. But I know that there's something that's probably hurting him that he's not able to communicate yet at 6 years old.
That's good.
But his three siblings stay there and he goes to his dad's house.
That's good.
And I remember being that person. My mom had me, and 10 years later, she had my three brothers. She married my stepdad, had my three brothers. So they lived with her. I stayed with my grandma. And there were times when I wanted to spend time with my mom and couldn't. And
Mm.
I'm so grateful for my grandma. But I
Yeah,
think there's a whole lot of work that has to be done to make kids not feel a void when leaving one parent, especially when they have another sibling. And I
yeah,
don't know if your son has siblings at
he
his
does
mom's house.
at both places.
Okay.
It's the crazy.
Yeah, and so that's a little different because my grandson only has siblings. At my daughter's the only one who has kids. His
Yeah.
dad doesn't have any other kids. So then it's just him and his dad when he goes to his dad's house,
Mhm.
and he's a lot more bored than he is with all the toys and his sister and his brothers at my daughter's house. So I don't know how has that played out for you and your family.
Yes, it's interesting. I think one day I'm gonna probably write a book on this 100%. But I've been fortunate to have a relationship with my son's mom that is very unique. We bumped heads for years. There was a lot of back and forth, a lot of disagreement in different ways that we had different ways that we viewed life and parenting and a lot of different things. And when she introduced the person that she's now engaged to, that introduction was strange as well. And it was strange, and I hope a man listens to this. It was strange because of my own control issues. It was strange because I recognized that I had a view on how this should look and how I didn't want another man around my child, or this is how it's going to be, and it was about me rather than about him, rather than
Mhm.
about the child. And recognizing and trusting in my son's mom enough and loving her enough to recognize that she would not put no one around my child that would harm him in any way possible. So I had to trust her enough. And over time, there was back and forth with me, even in her fiance. And it's super strange now because we have a great relationship. I would call him like a really, really good friend. And he's been there for me in some very, very vulnerable stages of life. Um, and it allowed me, in my, I guess my message to other people is that you have to remove your ego, your pride, and create an environment for your kid to thrive, right?
Yeah.
Um, so we touch base often, the three of us, and we touch base and we identify, look, like what's going on with Carter. We show up to parent teacher conferences together. And if there's an issue, we're showing up collectively. I'm not out of the loop with anything. Yeah, there's certain things that they do over there that I have no idea, but rules are consistent. If he gets in trouble, he's on punishment over there. When he comes back, he's on punishment over here until we collectively make a decision. There's some things that I've had to compromise on. There's some things that they've had to compromise on, but it's taken time. It's taken a lot of back and forth. It's taken a lot of crucial conversations, but I believe that there's a flow now. But again, it required me to be better. It required me to stop trying to be in control of everything and everybody and everybody's household that ain't got nothing to do with you. Um,
Mhm.
like you are only in control of your kid when they're with you. Um,
Mhm.
so I think there was a lot of unlearning that I had to do. And I think one of the other things that helped is to stop listening to everybody on the outside. You know, my parents' perspectives and my siblings' perspective and TikTok and social media's perspective, and really be able to create and sit down one-on-one with yourself, that person that you look at in the mirror. It's like, what type of environment do I want? What would be best for my child? And then communicate and being able to advocate that with towards the other person, so that then we can be able to create that environment for your child as well, but then also considering Carter's voice in this as well. So I think it's dope now. We were a week on, week off. We've been week on, week off for Jesus for a while. And we changed it this school year because Carter was like, look, I want to ride on the bus. So Monday through Wednesday, he rides on the bus to school. And then Thursday I pick him up and he's with me until the following Monday. And, we switch weeks and then we flip holidays and all these different things. And I think it's worked because I'm not trying to be in control. And I really be chilling now. So
Mhm.
I think, and I've seen, as we've gotten better as parents and guardians, he's seen it and he's seen the difference. Um, so that would be my feedback with that. I think a lot of people don't have what I have though, because I've seen some horror stories. I thank God for the mothers of my children, like every single day, because I don't have any baby mama drama in a sense at all. But it's a beautiful story.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
And one last thing, curious if there was any one thing you could change about your parenting, what would it be, or what advice would you have for maybe prospective parents or parents who are in a similar situation that you're in, co-parenting?
That are for parents. So all right, this is what I'm gonna say. I'm gonna answer this twofold. Number one is before you even have your child, whether you're pregnant, whether you're considering, whether you're in a relationship and wanting to have a child, you need to have like some tough conversations with your spouse or with your person that you're trying to conceive with. What is their parenting style? What are their philosophies on discipline? What are their philosophies on other parents? Do you need to have conversations with the extended parents prior to? What are boundaries that need to be set? Where is healthcare coming from? Who's paying for what? Like, what does this look like? What type of schooling religiously? What does religious institutions look like? When they get pregnant, who's paying the bill? Like, what does that look like?
Mhm.
Instead of things just being, expected. One of the things that I've learned in therapy is it's not about what we expect, it's what we agree upon. So I need you to make agreements with your person. Like, look, you are taking this these days. I am taking this these days. Who's waking up in the middle of the night? Who's not waking up in the middle of the night? Because a lot of things are expected, and then it becomes misunderstanding. So that's one.
Yep.
Number two, even if you have a child, I think it's the same thing. I think we need to get clear. Like, all right, you may want to put your kid in a swimming program and a coding program, and it may end up being $700 a month. Is it one of those things where we're doing this in our household, or if grandparents and extended parents pay for it, then it's whatever? Or is it like, nah, we're going to do this, we're going to collectively do this? I think, again, what type of environment, what type of parents do you want to be? Where is my kid going? And how are we both contributing to this kid's growth in this intentional way? Co-parents, I want you to write down, here's what's helped me. I want you to write down where you see your kid going in life. Let's say, just, and it doesn't have to be in life. What would be successful for your kid over the next year? Like, what would be success from a schooling standpoint, and why? From a special activity or extracurricular activity standpoint, why? From after school opportunities, why? From friends, from living situation, all these different things, and why? And I want you to ask, not request, like request that your other parent do the same thing. And then I want y'all to either do it collectively, and if you can't do it collectively, get a mediator. Send me a DM because I'll be the mediator. Send me, get a mediator to have that conversation with your other parent, and make it only about the child. And then whatever y'all decide, you have to consistently commit, and don't allow anything to throw you off of that calendar, that schedule. Because we don't always have to go through the courts. We don't have, like, none of my situations has ended up in court and child support and all these different things, because I'm a decent human being and I know how to have a conversation. And even if we don't get along, we can be able to still do what's best for the child. So to save yourself some money, some stress, and your child trauma, I want you to be willing to understand your child enough and advocate and be able to put the work in place. Now, I'm only speaking of like what's helped me. What's helped
Mhm.
me. And if you don't know, go to your parent. Like, go to the other parent. Like, don't be prideful and ask other people and get their opinion. Like, create a union, even if you're together or not, with your person, so that y'all can be able to show to this child that love exists, even if you don't have to be together. That's all I got.
Ooh, that was a great way to end. Thank you so
Appreciate it.
much for taking the time to talk with me today. And everyone, if you have comments, go ahead and type them in the comment section. Share some information. Give us your feedback on your thoughts or your biggest takeaways. And please subscribe to my channel. Go ahead and share this with someone who you think could benefit from this information. And I will see you on the next episode of the Don't Screw Up Your Kids podcast. Again, thank you, Kyle King, for sharing your life with us today.
Thank you.